At my husband's funeral, my daughter asked me for more money, and I discovered a betrayal that had been brewing for years. Some wounds don't bleed right away. They ache deep inside, like when you discover you've been invisible to the ones you loved most. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you hit the like button and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Carol Hope Miller. I'm 64 years old, and I live in a 2-story brick house in the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago. A house my late husband Edward and I bought 37 years ago, when we still believed that sacrifice was always rewarded with love. The vintage hand-painted tiles in the kitchen that I loved so much now seemed like silent witnesses to a life that was quietly falling apart. That October morning, while I was making coffee in my blue and white kitchen, with the scent of cinnamon I always added to the percolator, I received a call that would forever change my perception of what it means to be a mother. It was my daughter Jessica, 42 years old, who lived out in Naperville with her husband and my 2 grandchildren. Her voice sounded strangely cheerful for someone who had lost her father just 3 months earlier. "Mom, I need to talk to you. It's important." I knew her too well. That was the same voice she used as a child when she had broken something and needed to confess before I found out. "Come over this afternoon. I have to tell you something about the future." I hung up the phone with a strange feeling in my stomach, like when you sense a storm is coming but you can't see the clouds yet. I stood there, holding my coffee mug with both hands, looking out at the yard where Edward had planted an apple tree that was now bearing fruit. His last words echoed in my mind. "Carol, don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness. Not even our daughter." For 38 years of marriage, Edward had worked as an accountant for a construction firm while I dedicated myself completely to being a mother and homemaker. We had raised Jessica in a house filled with love, traditions, and the few luxuries we could afford. I remember the afternoons when she would come home from school, and I'd have her favorite grilled cheese sandwiches ready, with sharp cheddar melted just right, and a side of tomato soup. I remember the nights Edward read her stories while I finished ironing her school uniform for the next day. Jessica had been a brilliant child, always at the top of her class. When she turned 18, Edward and I sold our only car to pay for her business degree at a private university. "It's an investment in her future," Edward would say as we took the L train to our jobs every morning. I had found work at a local grocery store, weighing produce and counting change for 8 hours a day. But sometimes, investments turn against you. Jessica graduated with honors, got an excellent job at a multinational corporation, married Rick, a successful engineer, and gave us 2 beautiful grandchildren, Jacob and Lily. For the first few years, the visits were frequent. They'd come for lunch on Sundays, the kids would run around the yard, Jessica would help me set the table, and Rick would talk with Edward about the Bears and politics. But something changed when they moved to Naperville. The visits became more sporadic. Jessica always had commitments, important meetings, events at the club. When they did come, she spent most of the time checking her phone while I played with the children. The hugs grew shorter, the conversations more superficial. And always, there was a request at the end. "Mom, can you help me out with Jacob's tuition? This month has been really tight." "Mom, I need help with the deposit for the hall for Lily's first communion." "Mom, the car broke down. Do you have anything saved up?" Edward and I always said yes. We'd scrape together our savings, sell a piece of furniture. I'd work extra hours at the store, because that's what parents do. Everything for their children, down to the last dime, down to the last breath. The day Edward died of a heart attack, Jessica arrived at the hospital 2 hours after I called her. Not because she lived far away. The traffic from Naperville to Northwestern Memorial isn't that bad. She was late because she was in a meeting she couldn't cancel. She apologized through tears. She hugged me, but something in her eyes told me that part of her sadness was tied to worries that weren't exactly about the pain of losing her father. During the funeral, which I paid for with the few savings we had left and a loan from my sister Rose, Jessica looked genuinely sad. She wore an elegant black dress that must have cost more than I made in 2 months. Rick wore a tailored suit and Italian leather shoes. The children, 11 and 8, cried because they would miss their grandpa, who always had candy hidden in his pockets and told them stories about what Chicago used to be like. After the burial, back at my house, while I was pouring coffee for the few relatives who had joined us, Jessica approached me with that expression I knew all too well. "Mom, now that you're alone, I think we should talk about your future." That afternoon, when she arrived as we had agreed, Jessica was carrying a manila folder and wearing that forced smile she used when she had to deliver bad news. She sat on the armchair where Edward used to watch the news, crossed her legs elegantly, and opened the folder with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "Mom, Rick and I have been thinking, this house is too big for you all by yourself, and the upkeep must be so expensive." I felt as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my chest. Jessica kept talking while I sat paralyzed in my wicker chair, the same one where I had rocked my granddaughter Lily as a baby. "Look, Mom, we found a very nice assisted living facility out in Oak Brook. It has gardens, activities for seniors, medical services. It would be perfect for you." She pulled out some colorful brochures from the folder, with pictures of smiling elderly people playing bingo and doing crafts. "And the best part is, with the sale of this house, you could pay for several years in advance." "Sell the house?" The words came out of my mouth like a broken whisper. "Jessica, this is our home. You were born here. You grew up here. I taught you how to bake my apple pie in that kitchen. You learned to ride your bike in that yard." "Oh, Mom, don't get so sentimental. It's just a house." Jessica sighed with that impatience she had perfected during her years as an executive. "Besides, Rick and I were thinking it would be good for the kids to have more space. Jacob really needs his own room, and the new school we found is much closer to here than to Naperville." There it was, the truth, naked and cruel like an open wound. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about my daughter wanting my house. "But Jessica, I don't want to go to a facility. I'm fine here. I have my neighbors. I know everyone at the farmer's market. Mrs. Davis brings me fresh tomatoes every Tuesday." My voice trembled like the leaves on the apple tree in the wind. "This house holds our entire history. Mom, be realistic. You're 64. What are you going to do when you get sick? When you can't climb the stairs anymore? At the facility, you'd have nurses, company, security." Rick, who had remained silent scrolling on his phone, finally looked up. "Carol, Jessica's right. And think about it. This area is really appreciating. We could get a very good price for the property." "We could," I repeated slowly. Who is we in that sentence? Jessica exchanged a quick glance with her husband. "Well, Mom, obviously I'd help you with all the paperwork. It would be too complicated for you on your own. And since the money would be for your upkeep at the facility, well, we'd have to manage it together." For 38 years, I had heard Edward repeat a phrase his father had taught him. "Carol, when someone tells you something is for your own good, but they're the ones who stand to gain, be suspicious." In that moment, sitting in my own living room, watching my daughter turn my home into a business transaction, I understood exactly what Edward had meant. "I need to think about it," I finally said. "Of course, Mom, but don't take too long. I've already penciled in an appointment with a real estate lawyer for next week just in case." Jessica closed the folder with a snap that sounded like a verdict. "Oh, and one more thing. While you decide, maybe the kids could start staying here on some weekends. You know, to get used to the neighborhood." After they left, I sat in that same chair until it got dark. The silence of the house felt different, as if the walls had heard the conversation and were now looking at me with pity. I went to the kitchen and made dinner for one, a single scrambled egg and a piece of toast. I ate standing by the stove because sitting at the dining table reminded me of all the family dinners where Jessica arrived late, ate quickly, and left early. That night, as I prepared to sleep in the bed I had shared with Edward for nearly 4 decades, I found a shoebox in the closet I hadn't looked through since his death. Inside were all the letters I had written to him during our first years of marriage, when he was working on a project in Denver and we wrote to each other every week. There were also photos I didn't remember. Jessica at 5, covered in dirt after helping me plant roses in the garden. Jessica at 15, hugging me after her first heartbreak. Jessica at 25, proudly showing me her first paycheck. At what point had the little girl who helped me bake Christmas cookies in December turned into a woman who saw my house as a business opportunity? The next few days were a strange mix of forced routine and constant anxiety. Every morning I got up, made my coffee with cinnamon, watered the plants in the yard, went to the market, but everything felt temporary, as if I were living in a place that no longer belonged to me. Mrs. Davis, my lifelong neighbor, noticed my sadness. "What's wrong, Carol? You look so worried." "It's Jessica," I confessed as we picked out tomatoes at Mr. Henderson's stand. "She wants me to sell the house and move into a facility." Mrs. Davis dropped the tomato she was holding. "Are you crazy? You have no business being in a facility. You're healthy, you cook better than most young women, and you have more energy than my 40-year-old daughter. But she says the house is too big for me alone." What a coincidence that she'd think of that right when this neighborhood is getting so expensive. Mr. Henderson, who always listened to his customers' conversations, chimed in. "You know, Mrs. Miller, a house just like yours on the corner just sold for $900,000. 5 years ago, it was worth half that. $900,000. The number spun in my head all the way home. Jessica knew. Rick knew. Everyone knew but me. That afternoon, the phone rang. It was Jacob, my older grandson. "Grandma, is it true you're going to move away?" "Who told you that, sweetheart?" "My mom. She says you're going to a place where they can take better care of you." His voice sounded sad. "But I don't want you to go. Who's going to make grilled cheese like you do?" A lump formed in my throat. "Don't worry, Jacob. I haven't decided anything yet. It's just, my mom already started measuring my new room. She says it's going to be where your sewing room is now." I hung up the phone and ran up to the second floor. Sure enough, in my sewing room, where I had my 1987 Singer machine, my stored fabrics, the first communion dress I had made for Lily, there were marks from a measuring tape on the floor. Jessica had been measuring the space, without asking me, without waiting for my decision, as if the house were already hers. I sat on the floor of my sewing room, surrounded by fabric scraps and memories that now seemed condemned to be forgotten. The marks from the measuring tape on the floor looked like fresh scars, evidence of a betrayal I was only beginning to understand. Jessica had come into my house, walked through my private spaces, measured and calculated as if I were already dead. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house startled me. The refrigerator kicking on, the wind rustling the apple tree's leaves against the window, Mrs. Davis's footsteps next door. Everything sounded different, as if the house itself knew its days were numbered. At 3 a.m, I went down to the kitchen and made myself a chamomile tea with honey, the same kind I used to give Jessica as a child when she had nightmares. I sat at the table where we had eaten breakfast together for 18 years, where I had explained the changes in her body when she got her first period, where she had cried with me when she broke up with her first boyfriend. It was then that I remembered something I had completely forgotten. 3 years ago, when Edward was still alive, Jessica had come over, very upset. She had just fought with Rick about money, again. Her husband had made a bad investment, and they had lost a considerable amount. That afternoon, sitting at this same table, Jessica had cried like a child while I stroked her hair. "Mom, sometimes I feel like everything is falling apart. The house in Naperville costs so much. The kids' schools are outrageously expensive. Rick is under horrible pressure at work." She dried her tears with an embroidered napkin I had made myself. "Sometimes I think we'd be better off in a simpler house, in a neighborhood like this one." "Honey, money isn't the most important thing," I had told her, pouring more coffee into her cup. "Your father and I were happy here with very little. What matters is being at peace. You don't understand, Mom. Everything is different now. The kids go to a school where all the parents have brand new cars, huge houses. I can't be the only one who can't afford the things they take for granted. And is that more important than your peace of mind?" Jessica had looked at me with an expression I couldn't interpret at the time, but which I now understood perfectly. It was calculation. It was evaluation. It was the look of someone who was measuring my words, my house, my life, to see what could be of use to her. "No, Mom, of course not. I'm sorry, I'm just so stressed." Now, 3 years later, that conversation took on a completely different meaning. Jessica hadn't come to vent to me. She had come to scout. to plan. The following Thursday, Jessica arrived unannounced with a surprise that made my blood run cold. "Mom, I brought someone I want you to meet." Behind her was a woman in her 50s, dressed in a navy blue pantsuit with an overly professional smile. "This is Ms. Thompson. She's a real estate specialist for seniors." "Mrs. Miller, it's a pleasure to meet you." The woman extended her hand with a firmness that seemed rehearsed. "Your daughter has told me so much about you. I'm here to talk about the options we have to make this transition very simple and beneficial for the whole family." "What transition?" I asked, looking at Jessica with a mixture of disbelief and anger that was beginning to boil in my stomach. "Mom, don't be difficult. It's just so you have all the information." Jessica walked straight into the living room, as if she owned the place. "Ms. Thompson, make yourself comfortable. Can I get you some coffee?" "Jessica, wait a minute." My voice came out stronger than I expected. "No one asked me if I wanted to receive this woman in my home. Ms. Thompson exchanged a quick look with Jessica, the kind people exchange when they're dealing with someone they consider difficult or irrational. "Mrs. Miller, I understand this can seem overwhelming at first." The woman spoke with that condescending tone some doctors use with elderly patients. "But I assure you, this is for your own good. At your age, living alone in such a large house can be very dangerous." "Dangerous?" "Yes, ma'am. What if you fell down the stairs? What if you felt ill in the middle of the night? What if someone tried to break in? A woman your age, alone, is very vulnerable." Every word was like a small stab. They were painting me as an invalid, a burden, someone incapable of taking care of herself. And the most painful part was that my own daughter was standing there, nodding in agreement with every argument. "Furthermore," the specialist continued, pulling more papers from her briefcase, "we've identified several facilities that would be perfect for you. This one, for example, has an excellent activities program, senior yoga, painting workshops, supervised excursions." She showed me photos of a place that looked more like a hospital than a home. White hallways, small rooms with identical furniture, dining halls where groups of elderly people ate in silence under the watch of uniformed nurses. And best of all, Jessica took over with an enthusiasm that sounded fake and rehearsed, "with the sale of this house, you'd have more than enough money to pay for several years up front, and you'd even have some left over to enjoy, to treat yourself." "Treat myself?" The words came out bitter. "What treats am I going to give myself locked in a room that isn't mine? Eating food I didn't choose, following schedules I didn't set." "Oh, Mom, don't exaggerate. It's not a prison, isn't it? Can I leave whenever I want? Can I have visitors at any hour I please? Can I cook my own meals? Can I have my plants, my furniture, my memories?" Ms. Thompson smiled with that professional patience she had perfected after years of convincing families it was better to get rid of their elderly relatives. "Mrs. Miller, I understand your resistance. It's normal. Everyone your age feels the same way at first, but once they get used to it, most of them are very happy. They have constant company, scheduled activities, immediate medical care. What you're describing is a daycare for old people." Jessica's face turned red. "Mom, don't be rude. Am I the one being rude? Am I?" I stood up from my chair with an energy I didn't know I had. "I'm not the rude one, Jessica. It's rude to come to my house with a stranger to convince me to leave. It's rude to measure my sewing room without asking me. It's rude to treat your own mother like an obstacle you need to get rid of. That's not it, Mom. It's just nothing." The words poured out of me like water from a broken dam. "For 38 years, your father and I killed ourselves working to give you everything. We sold our car to pay for your college. I worked double shifts to buy you nice clothes. Your father went without dental work because the money went to your textbooks." Jessica looked at the floor. "Ms. Thompson checked her watch, obviously uncomfortable with the turn the conversation had taken. "And now that I'm a widow, when I need the comfort of my home more than ever, you come to tell me to leave? That this is too big for me? That I'm a danger to myself? Mom, please understand." "No, Jessica. You're the one who needs to understand." I walked to the front door and opened it wide. "Ma'am, thank you for your time, but I don't need your services." Ms. Thompson quickly gathered her papers, muttered something about calling when I was calmer, and left my house. Jessica stood in the middle of the living room, looking at me as if she didn't recognize me. "Mom, I don't know what's wrong with you lately. You seem like a different person." "You're right, Jessica. I am a different person. I'm the person who is no longer going to say yes to everything you ask for just because you're my daughter." Jessica stood there, arms crossed, with that look of frustration she'd had since she was a child when she didn't get what she wanted. But she was no longer a child asking for a toy at the store. She was a 42-year-old woman trying to manipulate her mother to get her hands on her home. "Mom, I think you're being very unfair to me." Her voice had changed, now sounding hurt, victimized. "I only want what's best for you. Don't you realize how hard this is for me, too? I have to work, take care of my kids, maintain my house, and on top of all that, worry about you here all alone. Nobody asked you to worry about me. You're my mother. Of course I worry, especially now that Dad is gone." Her voice broke on the last few words, and for a moment, I thought maybe I was being too hard on her. Every night I lie awake thinking, what if something happens to her? What if she falls? What if she gets sick and there's no one there to help her? "Jessica, I'm 64, not 94. I still drive, I cook, I clean this entire house by myself. I walk to the market. I carry my own grocery bags. I go up and down the stairs without any problems. But for how much longer will you be able to?" That question stuck in my mind like a thorn, because the truth was, I had asked it myself. When my knees ached after mopping, when I got tired more quickly than before, when I sometimes forgot where I'd put my keys. But it was one thing to acknowledge I was aging, and another thing entirely to let them treat me as if I were already an invalid. When that time comes, if it comes, I will make my own decisions about my life. And what if by then, you can't make decisions anymore? The question hit me like a ton of bricks. Jessica had touched on my deepest fear, becoming a burden, losing my autonomy, depending on others for everything. But I also realized something more sinister in her question. It wasn't genuine concern. It was a veiled threat. "Jessica, are you telling me that if I don't agree to leave now of my own free will, you might force me to later?" "No, Mom, I didn't say that." But her eyes avoided mine. "I'm just saying it's better to plan things ahead of time while you can still decide. I am deciding, and my decision is to stay in my house." Jessica sighed with the theatrical exaggeration she had perfected as a teenager. "Fine, Mom, if that's what you want." She walked toward the door, but before leaving, she turned back. "But when something happens to you, don't blame me for not having insisted more." She left without saying goodbye, without a hug, without the, "I love you, Mom," she had always said when she left, even during our worst fights. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house like a gunshot. I was left alone in the living room, looking at the half-finished cup of coffee Jessica had left on the side table. It still had the mark of her pink lipstick on the rim. For some reason, that image broke my heart more than the entire argument. My little girl wasn't my little girl anymore. The following days were strangely quiet. Jessica didn't call, didn't visit, didn't bring the kids over as she usually did. It was as if she had decided to give me the silent treatment until I changed my mind. But instead of making me feel guilty, her silence gave me time to think. On Saturday morning, while I was watering my plants in the yard, Mrs. Davis peeked over the fence that separated our properties. "And your daughter? Haven't seen her in days. We're in a bit of a fight," I confessed as I watered the poinsettias Edward had planted last December. "About the house?" "Yes, and about other things too." I told her everything that had happened with the real estate agent, the measuring in my sewing room, the constant pressure to move into a facility. Mrs. Davis listened in silence, shaking her head with increasingly evident disapproval. "Oh, Carol, I don't want to meddle in family matters, but I have to tell you something." She made sure no one else was listening. "Last Tuesday, I saw Jessica out on the street with a man in a suit. They stood outside your house for about half an hour, pointing at the roof, the windows, the garden. The man was taking pictures." My blood ran cold. "Pictures?" "Yes, with a professional camera. And he had a big portfolio. Looked like one of those guys who appraises houses for sale." "Are you sure it was Jessica?" "Of course I'm sure. I've known her since she was 5. Besides, she was in that white SUV her husband drives. I sat down on one of the plastic lawn chairs because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Jessica hadn't just measured my sewing room. She had brought an appraiser to my house, without telling me, without consulting me, as if I no longer existed. "And what did you do?" I asked Mrs. Davis. "Nothing. I thought you knew. But now that you're telling me all this, I realize she was doing something behind your back. Did the man go inside the house?" "Not that I saw, but they were outside for a long time, looking it over. And Jessica had keys in her hand. Of course she had keys. I had given them to her years ago for emergencies, when Edward was sick and we needed someone who could get in if something happened. I never thought she would use them to bring strangers to appraise my house without my permission. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. I went to the Lincoln Park Zoo by myself. I walked along the paths, sat on the main lawn, watching children play while their grandparents watched over them. I bought some popcorn with extra butter and had a coconut ice cream cone from a vendor cart. As I was walking, thinking about everything that was happening, I ran into someone I didn't expect to see. Diane Villanueva, a friend from elementary school whom I hadn't seen in over 10 years. We recognized each other immediately despite the time. "Carol, it's so good to see you." She hugged me with the kind of warmth only childhood friendships have. "How are you? How's Edward?" I had to tell her that Edward had passed away, and she told me she'd been widowed 2 years prior. We sat on a park bench to catch up. Diane told me she had gone through something very similar to my situation. "When my Gonzalo died, my kids wanted me to sell the house and move in with one of them. To take better care of you," they said. But I knew what they really wanted was the money from the sale. She laughed bitterly. At first, I felt so guilty for even thinking that. How could I suspect my own children? But then I realized that being a mother is one thing, and being a fool is another. And what did you do? I told them no. And I'll tell you the truth. It was the best thing I could have ever done. The first few months they were angry with me. They wouldn't talk to me. They wouldn't bring the grandkids over. But they got over it. And now they respect my decisions because they know I'm not some little old lady they can push around. Her words gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. If Diane could stand firm with her children, maybe I could too with Jessica. "You know the funniest part?" Diane continued. "Now my kids visit more often than before, because they're not coming out of self-interest anymore. They're coming because they want to, and you can feel the difference." That night, as I was having dinner alone in my kitchen, the phone rang. It was Jacob, my grandson. "Grandma, are you mad at my mom?" "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because my mom says you don't love her anymore, that you were really rude to her, and that's why we can't come visit you anymore." My heart sank. Jessica was using the children, manipulating the situation to make them think I was the bad guy. "Jacob, I will always love you all. And your mom too. But sometimes adults have problems we need to solve. Can't you solve them quickly? I miss your grilled cheese sandwiches. And Lily cries because she says she doesn't know when she'll see you again." That call was the last straw. Jessica had crossed every line. But using my grandchildren as emotional weapons was unforgivable. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling with rage. Not fear, not sadness. Pure rage. Jessica had crossed the one line she never should have, dragging my grandchildren into our conflict, making them suffer to pressure me. I wasn't going to forgive her for that. Early the next morning, I took the bus downtown. I had a mission. All night I had been thinking about my friend Diane's words. Being a mother is one thing, and being a fool is another. It was time to stop being a fool. My first stop was the bank where Edward and I had our account for over 20 years. I asked to speak with the manager, Mr. Peterson, an older man who knew our financial history. "Mrs. Miller, I'm so sorry for your husband's passing. He was a very respectable man." He adjusted his glasses as he looked over my documents. "How can I help you?" "I need to know my exact financial situation. Everything. Accounts, investments, insurance policies, debts. And I need to change all the PINs and passwords. I also want to remove my daughter as an emergency beneficiary on a few things." The manager looked at me surprised. "Are you sure, Mrs. Miller? That's a very significant decision." "I'm absolutely sure." What I discovered during those 2 hours at the bank left me stunned. Edward had been more careful and forward-thinking than I had ever imagined. Besides the house, which was fully paid off, there was a savings account with nearly $25,000 that I didn't know about. There was also a life insurance policy that paid out another $150,000. And most surprisingly, Edward had been investing small amounts in mutual funds for years, and those investments were now worth almost $80,000. In total, not counting the house, I had over $250,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. Why was I never told about all this? I asked the manager. Your husband was very specific. He wanted you to know about these accounts only after his death, and only if you came in and asked directly. He said he didn't want you to worry about money while he was alive. Typical Edward. Always protecting me, even from the good things. Does my daughter know about this? No, ma'am. Your husband never included Ms. Jessica on any of these accounts. In fact, the manager hesitated for a moment. He specifically requested that if anything happened to you, everything should go to charities, not to relatives. I left the bank with my head spinning. Edward had known something I didn't want to see. He had protected our money from Jessica because he had already seen the warning signs I refused to acknowledge. My second stop was the office of Ms. Chen, a lawyer specializing in family law who Mrs. Davis had recommended. Her office was in an old downtown building, but it looked serious and trustworthy. Mrs. Miller, please tell me what's happening. I told her everything. The pressure to sell the house, the appraiser's visit, the secret measurements, the manipulation with the grandchildren. The lawyer took notes as I spoke. Do you have any mental health issues? Any medical diagnosis that could be used against you? No, not at all. I'm perfectly fine. Does your daughter have any document that gives her power over your decisions? Not that I know of. Good. Then legally, she can't do anything without your consent. But we need to protect you from future maneuvers. The lawyer explained my options. We can draw up a very specific will, a limited power of attorney for real medical emergencies only, and a legal declaration that you are in full command of your mental faculties. Will that protect me? Completely. If anyone tries to declare in the future that you can't make your own decisions, we will have documents proving otherwise. I signed all the papers that same day. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control of my own life. When I returned home that afternoon, I was met with a surprise that made my blood boil. Jessica was in my driveway with Rick and an unknown man, all standing next to a truck filled with boxes and furniture. What is going on here? I shouted from my front door. Jessica was startled. She obviously wasn't expecting me home so early. Mom, good, you're here. This is Mr. Jenkins. He's a contractor. We were just showing him the house to see what kind of renovations it would need. Renovations for what? For when we put it on the market, obviously. Rick spoke as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A house sells better if it's in good condition. When we put it on the market. My voice was so loud that even the stranger looked frightened. Who is we in that sentence? Mom, don't shout. The neighbors will hear you. Let them hear me. Let everyone know how my daughter is trying to steal my house. The contractor, clearly uncomfortable, started packing up his things. Ma'am, I think I'll just come back another day when you've sorted things out. There won't be another day, I told him directly. This house is not for sale. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. After the man left, Jessica and Rick stood in my driveway like scolded children. Mom, you're making a very big mistake, Jessica said with that cold voice she used when things didn't go her way. We've already spoken to a lawyer. We can prove that living here alone is dangerous for you. Really? Which lawyer did you speak with? Rick and Jessica exchanged a look. Mr. Mendoza, Rick said. He specializes in cases of seniors who need protection. How interesting. And do you know what I did today? I pulled all the documents I had signed that morning out of my purse. I went to a lawyer who specializes in protecting seniors from abusive relatives. Jessica turned pale. What does that mean? It means I signed documents that prove I am in perfect command of my mental faculties, that no one can make decisions for me without my consent, and that if anyone tries to have me declared incompetent, they will have to prove it in court. Mom, why are you doing this? We just want to take care of you. No, Jessica, you just want my house, and I just found out there are other things you want too. I pulled out the bank statements. Did you know that your father left me almost $250,000 in addition to the house? Rick's eyes lit up like a kid's in a candy store. Jessica tried to hide it, but her interest was obvious too. Mom, why didn't you tell us? Because it's not your money. It's mine. And I just made a will that specifies exactly what will happen to everything when I die. And what's going to happen? Rick asked with an anxiety he could no longer conceal. That depends entirely on how you treat me from now on. Jessica approached me with that manipulative expression she had perfected over the years. Mom, we love you. If we've pressured you, it's because we're worried. But if you want to stay in your house, that's perfectly fine with us. Really? Of course. You're our priority. That's good to know. Because I'm not giving you another dime. A silence fell that you could cut with a knife. What? Jessica asked. You heard me. The handouts, the loans, the gifts, it's all over. If you need money, work for it, like I did for 40 years. But Mom, the kids can come visit me whenever they want, but with no conditions, no requests, no manipulations. And if you ever use them to pressure me again, you won't see them at all. Jessica started to cry, but they were no longer tears that hurt me. They were the tears of a grown woman who had just realized her plan had fallen apart. You can't do this to us, Mom. We're your family. Exactly. You're my family. And as family, you're going to learn to respect me. Or you're going to learn to live without me. Rick and Jessica left without saying goodbye. I watched their SUV drive down the street and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. That night, I had a peaceful dinner for the first time since Edward's death. I made myself huevos rancheros, poured a glass of fresh hibiscus iced tea, and ate while watching the news. No rush, no pressure, no need to plan how I was going to solve the next problem my daughter brought me. For the first time in months, I slept through the entire night. The following days were strangely silent. Jessica didn't call, didn't come by, didn't send texts. It was as if she'd decided to give me the silent treatment, hoping I would cave and call her to apologize. But instead of feeling guilty or lonely, I felt liberated. For the first time in years, I could wake up without wondering what Jessica was going to ask of me that day. I could drink my coffee calmly, without thinking about how I was going to solve my daughter's next financial crisis. I could plan my day without having to set aside time for her dramas and financial emergencies. On Wednesday morning, as I was hanging laundry in the yard, I heard a knock at the door. For a moment, my heart pounded thinking it was Jessica. But when I opened it, I found Jacob, my older grandson, standing alone on the doorstep in his school uniform. Grandma, can I come in? My love, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at school? Yeah, but I told my mom my stomach hurt and she let me stay home. He looked nervous, as if he were doing something forbidden. But I actually snuck out to come see you. I hugged him tightly and invited him in. I made him a glass of hot chocolate and we sat in the kitchen. Why did you sneak out, Jacob? Because my mom and dad won't let me come over. They say you're mad at us and that you don't want to see us anymore. A lump formed in my throat. That's not true, my love. I always want to see you. Your mom and I have some adult problems, but that has nothing to do with you. Is it because of the house? I heard my mom telling my dad that you were going to move away. I'm not going anywhere, Jacob. This is my house, and I'm going to stay right here. I saw the relief in his eyes. Really? You're not leaving? I promise. It's just, Lily cries a lot. She says she doesn't understand why we can't come see you anymore. And I miss you too. I miss talking with you. I miss you teaching me things in the garden. We spent the whole morning together. I taught him how to make grilled cheese, told him stories about when his mom was a little girl, and we played bingo. It was like going back to the days when Jessica would bring the kids over every weekend, and the house would be filled with laughter and voices. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Jessica, and she sounded hysterical. Mom, is Jacob with you? Yes, he's here. You can't have him there. I didn't give you permission. Jessica, he's my grandson, and he came because he wanted to see me. Take him to school immediately or I'm calling the police. The police? For being with my grandson in my own house? For having him without my permission. That's kidnapping. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own daughter, threatening to call the police because her son was with me. All right, Jessica, I'll take him to school. But what you're doing is despicable. I took Jacob to his school. During the bus ride, he was quiet, looking out the window. Grandma, why is my mom so angry? Sometimes adults make life complicated, my love, but I want you to know something. No matter what happens, you will always be my grandson, and I will always love you. And will we be able to see each other? Yes, sweetheart. One way or another, we'll see each other. That afternoon, after dropping Jacob off at school, I decided to do something I had been putting off for years. I went to a fabric store and bought beautiful cloth, colorful threads, and lace. I had stopped sewing when Edward got sick and needed full-time care, but now I had time again. I came home with bags full of materials and went up to my sewing room. I scrubbed the measuring tape marks off the floor, organized my fabrics on the shelves, and oiled my Singer machine. For the first time in months, that room felt like mine again. That night, as I was sewing a little girl's dress I'd been wanting to make, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mrs. Miller? This is Ms. Evans, Jacob's teacher. My blood ran cold. Did something happen? Don't worry, Jacob is fine. But I need to talk to you. Your daughter came in this afternoon, very agitated, saying you had kidnapped the boy. Obviously, that's not true, but I'd like to hear your version of events. I explained everything that had happened. The teacher listened patiently. Mrs. Miller, I've known Jacob for 3 years. He's a very smart and honest boy. He told me today that he just wanted to see his grandmother, that he missed visiting you very much. I don't see any problem with that. Thank you, Ms. Evans. But I have to tell you something else. Your daughter asked me to call her immediately if you came to the school or tried to contact Jacob. She told me you could be a danger to the child. A danger? Me? That's why I'm calling you directly. I wanted to meet you, to hear your side of the story. And I can tell you that you don't seem like a dangerous person at all. You seem like a grandmother who loves her grandson. That conversation calmed me, but it also made me realize just how far Jessica was willing to go to get her way. She was trying to paint me as an unstable, dangerous person, someone the children needed to be protected from. On Friday afternoon, while I was watering my plants, I had an unexpected visitor. It was my sister Rose, who lived in Cleveland and whom I hadn't seen since Edward's funeral. Carol, I came because Jessica called me. And what did she tell you? That you've been acting very strangely since Edward died, that you're refusing to sell the house, that you were rude to a woman who was only trying to help you, that you yelled at a contractor. And what do you think? Rose looked me up and down, as if evaluating me. I think you look better than you have in years. You look calmer, more resolute. Since I got here, you haven't mentioned a single one of Jessica's problems, not a single worry about money you have to give her. Because I'm not giving her money anymore. Really? And how did she take that? Very badly. That's why she's trying to convince the whole family that I'm crazy. Rose laughed. If being crazy means you've stopped letting your daughter walk all over you, then I hope I go crazy too. We spent the whole afternoon talking. Rose told me that Jessica had also called her to borrow money. She said it was an emergency, that she'd pay it back soon. But when I asked what it was for specifically, she got evasive. She said it was for household expenses, the kids' school. And did you lend it to her? No, because my gut told me something was off. And now that you've told me everything, I understand what it was. Rose stayed for dinner. I made her favorite dish, pot roast, and opened a bottle of red wine Edward had been saving for a special occasion. For the first time since his death, my house was once again filled with conversation and laughter. You know what, Carol? I think Edward would be proud of you. Why? Because you're finally standing up for yourself. For years, I watched you let Jessica trample all over you. Always worried about what she needed. Always running to solve her problems. It was exhausting just to watch. I thought that was being a good mother. Being a good mother is raising children who know how to stand on their own 2 feet and who respect you. It's not raising children who see you as their personal ATM. That night, after Rose left, I sat in my living room thinking about everything that had happened. 3 weeks earlier, I was a woman living in service of her daughter's problems. Now, I was a woman who had reclaimed control of her own life, and I was just getting started. On Monday morning, I received a call that changed my perspective on everything. It was Ms. Chen, my lawyer. Mrs. Miller, I need to see you urgently. Your daughter has just filed a lawsuit against you. A lawsuit? For what? Mental incompetence. She's petitioning the court to be declared your legal guardian and the guardian of all your assets. The air left my lungs. Jessica had followed through on her threat. She was trying to legally take everything that was mine. Can she do that? She can try. But we need to act fast. We need medical evidence that you're perfectly well, testimonies from people who know you, and to prepare our defense. That same afternoon, I went to Dr. Salinas, my doctor for my entire adult life. I explained the situation, and he was indignant. Carol, you are perfectly fine. In fact, you're in better shape than many women your age. Your blood pressure is normal, your lab work is excellent, your mind is crystal clear. He signed all the papers the lawyer had prepared. What your daughter is doing is an outrage. Over the next few days, my house became a hub of activity. Neighbors, friends, acquaintances from the market. Everyone came to testify that I was perfectly sane and capable of taking care of myself. Mrs. Davis brought over other neighbors who had known Jessica since she was a child. That girl was always very calculating, said Mrs. Henderson, who was 80 years old with a perfect memory. Even as a little girl, you could see she measured everything by what was convenient for her. Mr. Henderson from the vegetable stand came with a letter signed by all the market vendors. Mrs. Miller, you've been coming here 3 times a week for over 20 years. You always keep a perfect running tally in your head. You never get confused about prices. You're always up to date on everything happening in the neighborhood. Even Jacob's teacher came to give her testimony. Her grandson has spoken a great deal about her. It's clear they have a very healthy and loving relationship. An 11-year-old boy wouldn't lie about something like that. But the biggest surprise came on Wednesday. There was a knock on my door, and when I opened it, I found Rick, Jessica's husband. He was alone, looked nervous, and avoided my gaze. Can I come in, Carol? I need to talk to you. I let him in, but didn't offer him coffee or invite him to sit. He stood in my living room fiddling with his car keys. Carol, I've come to apologize. Apologize for what? For all of this. For the lawsuit. For trying to pressure you. For measuring your house without permission. He sighed deeply. I didn't agree with it, but Jessica convinced me it was for the best. And now you don't think so? Things have gotten really ugly. Jessica is obsessed. She talks all day about the house, the money, about how we're going to fix our financial situation once we have access to your assets. Your financial situation? Rick looked ashamed. We're broke, Carol. The company where I worked went under 6 months ago. I've been pretending to go to work so Jessica wouldn't find out, but I don't have a job anymore. Jessica doesn't know? No. And now I'm 3 months behind on rent for the house in Naperville, 2 tuition payments for the kids, car payments. I'm desperate. And that's why you wanted my house? Jessica said it was the only solution. That you didn't need such a big house. That the money would help us get back on our feet. He was quiet for a moment. But when I saw the lawsuit, when I saw she was asking to have you declared incompetent, that's just not right. Do the children know any of this? Jacob asks about you a lot. Lily cries because she says she misses her grandma. Jessica tells them you're sick and that's why they can't see you. My heart broke. My grandchildren thinking I was sick. That was why they couldn't visit me. Rick, what do you want me to do? Nothing, Carol. I just came to tell you that if you need me to testify in your favor, to testify that you are perfectly fine, I will. And Jessica? Jessica is going to be furious with me. She'll probably kick me out of the house. But I can't go on with this. That conversation gave me hope. But it also made me understand just how desperate Jessica was. It wasn't just greed. It was financial panic. That made her more dangerous, but also more predictable. On the day of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse with my lawyer and all my witnesses. Jessica was on the other side of the hall with a young, self-assured lawyer. She didn't greet me, didn't even look at me. The hearing was surreal. Jessica's lawyer presented his case as if I were a decrepit old woman who was a danger to herself and others. Your Honor, Mrs. Miller has exhibited erratic and irrational behavior. She refuses to accept help, verbally assaulted professionals who only wanted to assist her, and recently kept her grandson at her home without parental permission. Is that kidnapping? The judge asked. It's evidence of her lack of judgment, Your Honor. When it was my lawyer's turn, Ms. Chen presented all the testimonies, the medical exams, the statements from my neighbors and the market vendors. Your Honor, what we have here is a 64-year-old woman who manages her finances perfectly, maintains an impeccable home, has normal social relationships, and is in excellent physical and mental health. The only person who claims otherwise is her daughter, who has a clear financial interest in this petition. The most difficult moment was when the judge asked me to speak directly. Mrs. Miller, why do you think your daughter is doing this? I looked at Jessica for the first time that day. She looked small, scared. Nothing like the confident, manipulative woman who had been pressuring me for weeks. Your Honor, I believe my daughter is desperate. She has financial problems she doesn't know how to solve, and she sees my assets as the solution. But that doesn't make me incapable of managing my own life. Do you love her? The question caught me by surprise. Of course I love her. She's my daughter. But loving someone doesn't mean you let them destroy you. When the judge called for a recess, Jessica approached me for the first time in weeks. Mom, we can still fix this. I'll withdraw the petition if you agree to sell the house and split the money. No, Jessica. You're not going to help me at all? I'm going to help you in the only way that will truly serve you. By not being your accomplice in this. I'm your mother. You're supposed to protect me. I am protecting you, Jessica. I'm protecting you from becoming someone neither of us wants you to be. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge had made her decision. After reviewing all the evidence presented, I find no basis to declare Mrs. Miller incapable of managing her own affairs. The petition is dismissed. Furthermore, I am cautioning the petitioner that filing frivolous lawsuits can result in legal sanctions. Jessica walked out of the courthouse without saying goodbye. Rick approached me before he left. Carol, thank you for not hating me for all this. Rick, you need to be honest with Jessica about your job situation. Secrets only make things worse. I know. It's time to tell the truth. That night, while celebrating my victory with a chamomile tea in my kitchen, the phone rang. It was Jacob. Grandma, my dad told us we can come see you now. Really, sweetheart? Yeah. He says the adult problems are fixed now. Can we come over on Sunday? Of course you can. For the first time in months, I had something to look forward to. Sunday with my grandchildren. Sunday arrived with a clear sky and the aroma of the pot roast I had started at dawn. I had set the dining room table with the embroidered tablecloth I saved for special occasions, filled the kitchen with everything I knew Jacob and Lily loved, and had been waiting by the window since 10, even though we had agreed on noon. When I saw the white SUV park in front of my house, my heart leaped with joy, but only the children got out. Rick walked them to the door, gave me a small wave from a distance, and drove away. Jessica hadn't come. Grandma! Lily ran toward me with her arms wide open. At 8, she still had that way of hugging that envelops you completely, without reservations, without fears. Jacob, older now, more aware of the family tensions, hugged me too, but with a seriousness a boy of 11 shouldn't have. Where's your mom? I asked as I invited them in. She's mad, Lily said with the brutal honesty of children. She says she doesn't want to come because you hurt her. I didn't hurt your mom, sweetheart. I know, Jacob said, looking at me with those eyes that were so much like Edward's. Dad explained to us that sometimes adults fight about things like money and houses, but that it has nothing to do with us. We had a beautiful afternoon. We baked cookies together. I showed them how to make apple pie from scratch just like my grandmother had taught me, and we played Monopoly until they had memorized all the properties. Lily helped me water the plants while Jacob told me about school, his friends, and the book he was reading. Grandma, is it true they wanted to take you to a place where only old people live? Who told you that? I heard them when my parents were fighting. My mom said it was for the best, but my dad said you didn't want to go. And what do you think? Jacob grew thoughtful, as he always did before giving an important answer. I think this is your house, and nobody should make you leave your house if you don't want to. When Rick came back for them at sunset, the kids didn't want to leave. Lily even cried a little, clinging to my leg. Can we come again next Sunday? Jacob asked. Every Sunday you want, I promised. After they left, I stood in my driveway watching the SUV disappear. The house felt different now, not empty, but full of possibilities. For the first time in months, I had something to look forward to, the Sundays to come. The following days were strangely peaceful. Jessica didn't call, but I didn't expect her to. I knew her well enough to know that when things didn't go her way, her first reaction was offended silence. But for the first time, her silence didn't distress me. It gave me peace. On Tuesday morning, while I was sewing in my room, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Mrs. Miller, this is Claudia Herrera from the Chicago Tribune. I'd like to interview you." "An interview? About what?" "Your case has become well known among lawyers who specialize in elder rights. Your attorney told us your story, with your permission, of course. We think it could help other people who are going through similar situations." At first, I hesitated. I wasn't someone who sought public attention, but then I thought of all the women like me who might be suffering in silence, letting themselves be manipulated by their own children, believing that was what being a good mother meant. All right, but only if it can help other people. The journalist came to my house on Thursday. She was a young woman, about 30, but she had a seriousness and respect that immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Miller, when did you realize that what was happening wasn't normal?" "I think it was when my grandson told me he missed my grilled cheese sandwiches. I realized I had been so busy solving my daughter's problems that I had stopped living my own life." The interview lasted 2 hours. We talked about everything. The guilt that mothers often feel, the difference between helping and being used, the importance of seniors maintaining their autonomy. What would you say to a woman who is going through something similar? That loving your children doesn't mean destroying yourself for them. That a good mother teaches her children to be independent, not to be parasites. The article was published the following Sunday. Claudia had warned me it might generate a reaction, but I didn't expect what happened. My phone didn't stop ringing all week. Women from all over the city called to tell me their stories. Margaret, 80 years old, whose son had sold her house without telling her and put her in a terrible facility. Hope, 75, whose children took turns asking her for money and never visited just to talk. Rosemary, 68, who had been supporting a 40-year-old son who refused to work. Mrs. Miller, each one told me, with variations of the same story. When I read your article, I realized I'm not crazy, that what's happening to me isn't right. Some asked for advice. Others just wanted someone to listen. They all needed to know they weren't alone. One of the calls particularly struck me. It was a woman who identified herself only as Lucy. "Mrs. Miller, I'm 50. My mom is 78 and is going through the exact same thing you did. My brother wants her to sell her house and move in with him, but I know what he really wants is the money. My mom doesn't dare say no because she thinks she'll end up alone. Do you support her? I try, but my brother says I'm selfish, that I don't want to take care of her. The truth is, I'm lost. Bring her to my house. Let her talk with me." That conversation gave me an idea. My house was large. I had empty rooms. I had a kitchen where several people could fit. Why not turn it into a place where women like me could find support? On Friday, I called Ms. Chen to ask about the possibility of opening my home as an informal support center for senior women. "That's an excellent idea, Mrs. Miller, but we'd have to do it properly with the necessary permits, the right legal protections. Is it possible?" "Of course. And I know people who can help us. There are organizations that support these kinds of initiatives." That night, as I was planning how I could transform my house into something more than just my home, the phone rang. It was Jessica. "Mom, I read the article." Her voice sounded different. Not angry, not manipulative. It sounded tired. "And? Was it necessary to air our dirty laundry in public?" "I didn't air dirty laundry, Jessica. I told my story to help other women. Everyone is going to think I'm a terrible daughter. That's up to you, not me." She was quiet for a long moment. "Mom, Rick told me the truth about his job. I'm glad he was finally honest with you. We're broke. We're going to lose the house in Naperville." "I'm very sorry to hear that, Jessica. Are you really sorry? Or are you happy that things are going badly for me?" "I will never be happy that things are going badly for you. You're my daughter. But I'm also not going to rescue you from the consequences of your decisions." "So you're not going to help us?" "That depends on what kind of help you need." "What do you mean?" "If you want money to keep living a lifestyle you can't afford, no. If you need a temporary place to live while Rick finds a job, And you two get back on your feet. Yes. You'd let us come live with you? With conditions. Rick has to look for a real job, not keep pretending. You have to stop seeing me as a personal bank. And you both have to respect me in my own home. And the kids? The kids will always be welcome here. They're my grandchildren. Jessica cried. It was the first time in years I had heard her cry without it being manipulation. Mom, I ruined everything. Not everything, Jessica, but a lot of things. The question is, what are you going to do to fix them? I don't know where to start. Start by being honest. With me, with Rick, with the kids, with yourself. When we hung up, I thought about that conversation. Jessica had finally hit rock bottom. And maybe, just maybe, that was what she needed to start to change. For the first time in months, I had hoped that my daughter could once again become the person I had raised. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, a moving truck pulled up in front of my house. Behind it was Rick's white SUV, loaded to the brim with suitcases and boxes. Jessica got out of the passenger seat holding Lily's hand, while Jacob helped his dad carry the heavier things. I stood at the door, watching my daughter walk toward me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face in years. Genuine humility. Not the feigned humility she used when she wanted something, but the real humility of someone who has lost everything and needs to start over. Mom, she said when she reached the door, thank you for letting us come. It's temporary, Jessica, while you get back on your feet. I know. The kids ran to me, excited about the idea of living at Grandma's house. For them, it was an adventure. They didn't fully understand that their parents had lost their home. They just knew they were going to spend more time with me. Are we going to live here, Grandma? Lily asked, jumping with excitement. For a little while, my love. Rick approached with a box in his hands. He looked embarrassed, but also relieved. Carol, you don't know how grateful I am. And I promise you, this won't be forever. It better not be, Rick. And you better look for a real job this time. I already have 3 interviews scheduled for next week. Fitting 4 more people into my house wasn't easy. Jessica and Rick took the guest room. Jacob set up in my sewing room after we moved the Singer machine to a corner, and Lily made her own little space in the room that had been Jessica's as a child. The first few days were tense. Jessica was in a bad mood, feeling humiliated at having to move back into her mother's house at 42. Rick left early every day to look for work and came back in the evenings tired and discouraged. The children, on the other hand, were happy. For them, it was like a permanent vacation at Grandma's. The first week, we established the house rules. I was still the owner of the house. Jessica and Rick had to contribute to food and utility costs. Everyone was responsible for cleaning their own spaces, and I made the important decisions about the house. This is not a democracy, I told them during our first family meeting at the dining room table. It's my house, and my rules are to be respected here. Jessica pursed her lips but said nothing. The children nodded solemnly, as if they were in school receiving instructions from the teacher. The biggest change was in everyone's routine. I, who had lived alone for months, suddenly had to coordinate bathroom time in the mornings, plan meals for 6 people, and mediate family conflicts that arose from the stress of the situation. But there were good things, too. Sundays were no longer just for the grandkids, but for the whole family. We had breakfast together, the kids helped me in the garden, and Jessica occasionally offered to cook. Rick, when he wasn't job hunting, fixed things around the house that had been broken for years. The second week, Jessica had a moment of honesty I wasn't expecting. It was a Tuesday night. The kids were already asleep, and Rick had gone to the corner store to buy milk. Jessica and I were alone in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes. Mom, I have to tell you something. Go on. For years I saw you as a resource, as someone who would always be there to solve my problems. She dried her hands on a kitchen towel, avoiding my gaze. I never thought of you as a person with your own needs, your own dreams. And now you do? Now I realize I was very selfish, that I treated you like you were my personal employee, not my mom. What changed your perspective? Because when we lost everything, when I had no choice but to ask you for help, I realized you could have said no, and it would have been fair for you to say no after everything I did to you. It was the first time in years Jessica had acknowledged she had done something wrong. She wasn't trying to justify herself or blame others. She was being honest. Jessica, I will never stop loving you, but I will stop letting you hurt me. I know, and I'm sorry. Apologies are earned with actions, not with words. I know. The third week brought a significant change. Rick got a job at an accounting firm. It wasn't the executive position he had before, and the salary was considerably lower, but it was an honest, stable job. It's a new beginning, he told me the night he came home with the news. I'm going to have to work very hard to earn back the trust of Jessica, the kids, and you. Hard work never hurt anyone, I replied. Jessica also started looking for a job. She had stopped working when Lily was born, convinced that Rick's salary was enough to maintain the lifestyle they wanted. Now she was facing the reality that she needed to contribute financially to the family. Mom, do you think I'm too old to start over? She asked me one afternoon while updating her resume on the kid's computer. Jessica, you're 42, not 72. Of course you can start over. It's just been so many years without working. Who's going to want to hire me? Someone who knows how to recognize that a woman who raised 2 children and managed a household for 15 years has organizational, multitasking, and problem-solving skills that many employees don't. The fourth week, while Jessica was at a job interview and Rick was at the office, I received an unexpected visit. It was Lucy, the woman who had called me after reading my interview, and she had brought her mother. Eleanor was 78, but she looked strong and lucid. She reminded me of myself a few months earlier, a senior woman being pressured by her children to make decisions she didn't want to make. Mrs. Miller, Lucy told me about you. She says you understand what I'm going through. Please sit down, Eleanor. Let's talk. We spent the whole afternoon talking. Her story was very similar to mine. A son who wanted her to sell her house to protect her, but who really needed the money for his own financial problems. And what do you want to do? I asked her. Stay in my house. But I'm afraid of being alone, of something happening to me and no one realizing. What if you weren't alone? That conversation was the seed of something bigger. That night, when Jessica returned from her interview, she got the job at a human resources firm, I told her about my conversation with Eleanor. Mom, are you thinking of turning this house into some kind of shelter for senior ladies? Something like that. But not a shelter. A community. How? Women who are going through similar situations, who need support, companionship, a place where they can maintain their dignity while they solve their problems. Jessica was thoughtful. And what about us? You'll be here until you can get your own place again, but after that, you'll have to move out. What I'm planning is bigger than our family problems. That night, Jessica and I stayed up late, planning how my idea could work. For the first time in years, we were working on something together. Like a team, like a mother and daughter who respected each other. Mom, she said before going to bed, I'm proud of you. Why? Because you didn't settle for being a victim. Because you decided to turn your pain into something that can help other people. A month after they moved in, the family had found a rhythm. Rick was working hard at his new job. Jessica had gotten a job and was saving every penny to be able to rent a new house, and the kids were adjusting well to their new school in the neighborhood. But the most important thing was that we had learned to respect each other. Jessica no longer saw me as an endless source of money, but as a woman who had taken control of her own life. Rick had stopped pretending and had taken responsibility for his mistakes. The children were seeing an example of how a family can pull through when everyone works together. Grandma, Jacob told me one night as he helped me wash the dishes, my mom says we're going to be moving out soon. Yes, sweetheart, when your parents have their own house again. But are we still going to come visit you? Of course. This will always be your grandma's house. And the ladies who are going to come live here, are they going to be like our grandmas too? His question moved me. They can be if you want them to. I do. Lily does too. She says the more grandmas we have, the better. That night I lay awake thinking about everything that had changed in the last few months. It had started with me being a lonely woman, manipulated by my own daughter, on the verge of losing everything I held dear. Now I was a woman who had reclaimed her life, repaired her relationship with her family, and was about to embark on a new adventure that could help many other women. It all started with a word it took me 64 years to learn how to say, no. 6 months later, my house had changed completely, but it was still my home. Jessica, Rick, and the kids had moved into a modest but comfortable house in Lakeview, close to both of their jobs. It was a house they could afford on their own salaries, without unnecessary luxuries, but filled with the love they had learned to value during the months we lived together. The farewell was emotional, but not sad. We knew they were leaving because they were ready, not because there were problems between us. Jessica hugged me at the door before getting into the car. "Mom, thank you for teaching me how to be a better person. Thank you for giving me the chance to know the woman you've become." The kids cried a little, but I promised them that every Sunday would remain sacred for us to be together, and that now they would have two homes where they would always be welcome. A week after they left, my first housemates arrived. Eleanor, the woman I had met through Lucy, was the first. Her son had finally accepted that his mother wasn't moving in with him, especially after she showed him she had a safe place to live with other women in her same situation. The second was Margaret, a 68-year-old retired teacher, whose daughter-in-law had been pressuring her to sell her house and give them the money for the grandchildren's future. Margaret had read my article and contacted me through Ms. Chen. The third was Hope Peterson, a 73-year-old widow whose 3 children lived out of state and only called when they needed her to send money. Hope had a modest but decent pension and had been sending almost all of it to her kids until she realized they were leaving her with nothing for her own survival. With the help of Ms. Chen and a few senior support organizations, we had turned my house into a fully legal mutual support home. It wasn't a nursing home or a medical facility. It was a community of women who had decided to age with dignity, accompanied but independent. Each had her own room, but we shared the common areas. Each contributed according to her ability, some with money, others with housework, others with their knowledge and experience. Eleanor, who had been a seamstress her whole life, took charge of mending everyone's clothes. Margaret, with her teaching experience, started giving literacy classes to women in the neighborhood who had never learned to read well. Hope, who had worked at a bank, took on the task of helping everyone with their personal finances. I became the general coordinator, but also the head cook. My kitchen, which had been so quiet during my months of loneliness, was now filled with voices, laughter, and the constant aroma of home-cooked food. The rules were simple but firm. No alcohol or drugs, mutual respect, contribution according to each person's ability, and privacy when someone needed it. We had weekly meetings to resolve any conflicts and plan activities. Sundays became special. Jessica, Rick, and the kids would come for lunch, and the children now had 4 grandmas who spoiled them and told them stories about what Chicago used to be like. Jacob had started asking Margaret to teach him how to play the guitar, and Lily followed Eleanor around the house, learning to sew and embroider. "It's like having a really big family," Lily told me one afternoon while helping Eleanor plant flowers in the garden. "Do you like it?" "I love it. And my mom does too. She seems more peaceful now." It was true. Jessica had changed a lot. Her job in human resources kept her busy and happy. She had learned to manage a realistic family budget, and above all, she had learned to value genuine relationships over material possessions. One afternoon, while Jessica and I were making a big batch of chili for Sunday dinner, she said something that filled me with pride. "Mom, yesterday I was talking to a colleague at work who's going through something similar to what I went through with you." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that true love isn't about getting everything you want from someone, but about respecting their decisions and valuing their happiness above your own convenience." "And what did she say?" "That it sounded very nice in theory, but that in practice it was very difficult." "And what did you tell her?" "That you're right. It is difficult. But it's the only way to have real relationships instead of transactional ones." 8 months after Eleanor, Margaret, and Hope arrived at my house, we had our first graduation. Margaret had met a very nice widower in her park walking group, and they had decided to get married and move to Scottsdale. The farewell was bittersweet. We were happy for Margaret, but sad to see her go. However, we had learned that the goal of our community wasn't to hold on to women forever, but to give them a safe place where they could make decisions about their lives without pressure or manipulation. "Carol," Margaret told me the night before she left, "you saved my life. Not physically, but emotionally. You gave me back my self-confidence. You saved yourself, Margaret. I just gave you a safe place to do it." Margaret's spot was taken by Anne, a 75-year-old woman who had worked her whole life as a vendor at a local market. Her children wanted her to retire and give them the money from the sale of her stall, but she wanted to keep working. "I'm not going to become a burden to anyone," she told us the day she arrived. "I came here to live with women who understand that getting older doesn't mean becoming useless." Our little experiment had started to attract attention. Journalists, social workers, city officials. Everyone wanted to know how our community worked. Some families sent their mothers or grandmothers to us, thinking we were some kind of cheap nursing home, but they soon realized we didn't accept anyone who didn't come of her own free will. "This isn't a place where people come to hide their old folks," I explained to a man who wanted to deposit his 80-year-old mother-in-law. "It's a place where women come to live with dignity and autonomy." A year after our project began, Jessica organized a surprise party for my 66th birthday. Not only did my family come, but all the women who had passed through the house, including Margaret with her new husband, and dozens of women from the neighborhood who had found in our community an example that aging didn't have to mean becoming invisible. "Mom," Jessica said during the toast, speaking in front of all the guests. 2 years ago, I saw my mother as someone who was done living, someone I had to take care of. Today, I see a woman who is just beginning the most important part of her life. Eleanor, who was now 79 but looked 10 years younger than when she arrived, raised her glass of punch. To Carol, who taught us that old age isn't a disease to be cured, but a stage of life to be lived with pride. Everyone applauded. The children ran around the yard, playing near the plants we had all planted together. Rick chatted with Margaret's husband about plans to create a similar community in Scottsdale. Jessica helped Anne serve the cake, the two of them laughing about something only they understood. That night, after everyone had left and the women of the house had retired to their rooms, I was left alone in my living room, the same living room where months before, Jessica had pressured me to sell my house, the same living room where I had cried from loneliness after Edward's death, the same living room where I had made the most difficult and important decision of my life, to say no. I looked at the photographs that adorned the walls. They were no longer just pictures of my nuclear family. Now there were photos of all the women who had passed through this house, photos of community celebrations, photos of the neighborhood kids who came for sewing classes with Eleanor, photos of the trips we organized to museums and parks. My house was still my house, but now it was also something bigger, a home for women who had decided they deserved respect, dignity, and the freedom to make their own decisions. Edward had been right. I was worth more than I had believed for years. And not only that, I had a lot to offer the world, much more than I had ever imagined. At 66, I had finally learned the most important lesson of my life, that caring for others doesn't mean neglecting yourself, and that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. 3 years after that first decision to say no, my life had taken on dimensions I never imagined possible. The house Jessica once wanted to take from me had become the heart of something much bigger than my family problems. It was time to reflect on everything that had changed, not only in my life, but in the lives of all the women who had found refuge and rebirth within these walls. On a spring Sunday morning, as I prepared coffee in the kitchen I now shared with 5 extraordinary women, I received a call that filled me with a deep sense of satisfaction. It was Ms. Chen, my lawyer, who had also become a friend and ally in this project. "Carol, I have wonderful news. The city of Chicago wants to use your model as the basis for a pilot program across the city. They're going to create 10 homes like yours." I sat down on a kitchen chair, feeling my legs tremble with emotion. "Really?" "Completely serious. And they want you to be the general coordinator of the program, with a salary, benefits, official recognition." I hung up the phone and just sat there, looking out at the garden where Eleanor was watering the plants while singing a song she had learned in her youth. At 82, that woman radiated a vitality she didn't have when she arrived. Pressured by a son who wanted to take over her house, Anne appeared in the kitchen with a smile that lit up her entire wrinkled face. "Carol, have you seen today's paper?" She showed me the front page of the local section. There was a picture of our house, with the headline, "The Home That Changed the Perspective on Aging in Chicago." The article talked about how our model had inspired similar initiatives in other cities and even in some rural towns. "Look at this," Anne said, pointing to a line in the article. It says that Carol Miller demonstrated that old age can be the most productive and meaningful stage of life. Just then, the other women of the house entered the kitchen. Hope, who was now 77 but managed the house finances with the precision of a certified accountant. Rosemary, 71, who had arrived after her children emotionally blackmailed her into signing over her house. Sarah, 74, whose story was heartbreaking. Her 3 daughters had conspired to have her declared mentally incompetent to take control of her pension. "What are we celebrating?" Rosemary asked, noticing the festive mood. I told them about the call from Ms. Chen. The reaction was immediate: shouts of joy, hugs, tears of happiness. These women had seen this project born from its humble beginnings, and now they were seeing it become something that could change the lives of thousands of women across the country. "We have to celebrate," Hope shouted. "I'm making my special brisket. And I'll make my famous macaroni and cheese," Sarah added. "And we have to call Jessica," Eleanor said from the garden, having heard the whole conversation through the open window. That afternoon, as we prepared the impromptu celebration, Jessica arrived with her whole family. She no longer drove the white SUV they had lost during their financial crisis, but a modest, well-kept car they had bought with their own savings. Jacob, now 14 and almost as tall as his dad, ran to me with that teenage energy that defined him. "Grandma, my mom told me the news. You're going to be famous all over Illinois." Lily, 11 and with a personality that was more like mine every day, hugged me tightly. "Grandma, I'm so proud of you. At school, I always brag that my grandma is the lady who helps old ladies stand up to their kids." Jessica approached me with a look of genuine pride that reminded me of the little girl she had been before the pressures of adult life transformed her into someone I almost didn't recognize. "Mom, when I see everything you've accomplished, I'm embarrassed to remember how I treated you." "Jessica, the past is the past. What matters is what we build from here on out. It's just that sometimes I think of all the opportunities I lost to really know my mother. For years I only saw you as my mom, the person who had to help me. I never saw you as Carol, the woman with her own dreams and abilities." Rick, who had arrived behind her carrying a bottle of sparkling cider and a cake, joined the conversation. "Carol, you taught our whole family that respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And that true love isn't about getting everything you want from the other person." During dinner, as all the women of the house shared anecdotes about how they had arrived here and how their lives had changed, I realized something profound. Each of these women had arrived feeling invisible, disposable, like a burden their families wanted to get rid of. Now they were empowered women, with their own projects, with healthy family relationships, or the strength to live without them if necessary. Eleanor had started sewing again, not just for us, but for a boutique downtown that sold handmade clothing. Her income was modest, but it gave her an economic independence she hadn't had in years. Rosemary had started giving baking classes to people in the neighborhood, rediscovering a passion she had abandoned when she got married 50 years ago. Hope had started a social media account where she gave financial advice to seniors, and she already had thousands of followers who consulted her on how to protect their savings from abusive relatives. Sarah had learned to read and write properly with the help of the classes we organized in the house, and now she was writing a book about her life. "Carol," Eleanor said to me during dessert, "do you remember what you told me the first day I came to visit you?" "Not really." "What did I say?" "You told me the difference between being old and being an elder was that old people wait for others to decide for them, while elders make their own decisions." "And what do you think now?" "That you were right. I came here feeling old, invisible, like a problem someone else had to solve. Now I feel like an elder, experienced, wise, capable of making my own decisions and helping other women make theirs." After dinner, when it was just Jessica and me cleaning the kitchen, my daughter asked me a question that took me by surprise. "Mom, do you forgive me?" "Jessica, we've already talked about that." "No, I don't mean forgiveness for the specific things I did. I mean forgiveness for all the years I failed to see you as the extraordinary woman you are." I fell silent, my hands submerged in the soapy water of the sink, feeling those words heal wounds I didn't even know I had. Mom, for years I thought you were born to be my mother. It never occurred to me that being my mother was just one of the many things you were capable of doing. And what do you think now? That you're a woman who chose to be a mother, who did it with love and dedication, but that you are also many other things. You're a leader, a visionary, a woman who has changed the lives of dozens of people. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in my living room reading the letters that had arrived during the week. Women from all over the country writing to tell me their stories, to ask for advice, to thank me for showing them it was possible to defend themselves without losing their dignity. One letter in particular moved me deeply. It was from a woman in Ohio who told me, "Mrs. Miller, your story taught me that saying no is not an act of selfishness, but an act of self-love. Thank you for teaching me that I can love my children without destroying myself for them." The next morning, as I was having breakfast with my housemates, the phone rang. It was Jacob. "Grandma, I have to tell you something. Yesterday in school, we had to write an essay about our favorite hero. And who did you write about?" "About you. I wrote that my grandma is my hero because she proved that it's never too late to change your life, and that age doesn't make you invisible. It makes you wise." I hung up the phone with tears in my eyes. Not of sadness, but of a happiness so deep I could barely contain it. At 69, I had discovered that life doesn't end when your children grow up, when you're widowed, or when society decides you're no longer productive. Life is just beginning when you learn to value yourself as much as you have valued others your entire existence. Edward was right when he told me not to let them eat me alive, but he had understated it. Not only had they not eaten me alive, I had flourished in ways I never imagined possible. And this, I thought, as I watched my housemates plan the day's activities, is just the beginning. 5 years after that first time I said no, I find myself sitting in the same armchair where Jessica announced she wanted to sell my house. But everything is different. The light coming through the windows seems brighter, the air feels cleaner, and every corner of this house breathes life, purpose, and dignity. Today is Sunday, and like every Sunday for years, my family is coming for lunch. But it's no longer just Jessica, Rick, and the grandkids. Now we are an extended family that includes all the women who have found a home within these walls, and the families who have learned to value their mothers and grandmothers thanks to our example. Jacob comes running from the kitchen, 17 now, tall and strong, with a smile that lights up the whole house. "Grandma, I have incredible news. I got into college. I'm going to study social work." "Really, my love? And what inspired you to choose that career?" "You, Grandma. I want to help families like ours that almost destroy themselves because of misunderstandings, because they don't know how to communicate, because they don't respect each other." Lily, now 14 and with a character more like mine every day, approaches, drying her hands on the apron she wears when she helps me cook. "Grandma, I've also decided what I'm going to study." "What, sweetheart?" "Law. I want to be like Ms. Chen, to protect older people from their own families when necessary." Jessica appears from the living room carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers. At 47, she looks younger and more at peace than she did at 30. The constant stress of maintaining a lifestyle she couldn't afford had vanished from her face, replaced by the serenity of someone who has learned to value what really matters. "Mom, these flowers are from my garden. Rick and I are growing roses just like the ones you have here. How's the new house?" "Perfect. Small, but perfect. The kids have their rooms, we have our space, and most importantly, it's ours. Paid for with our own work, not with someone else's sacrifices." Rick comes in carrying a huge pot that gives off a delicious aroma. "Carol, I brought chili. I made it with the recipe Anne taught me before she went to live with her sister in Cleveland." In the last 5 years, many women had passed through this house. Some had left to get married again, others to live alone but empowered, others to reconcile with families who had learned to respect them, but they all left stronger than when they had arrived. Currently, 6 of us live here. Me, Eleanor, who is now 84, but still sews and teaches her art to neighborhood girls. Hope, who at 78 has become a social media influencer with over 100,000 followers seeking her financial advice. Sarah, who published her book and now gives lectures on late life literacy. Rosemary, who opened her own bakery. And the newest, Christine, a 65-year-old widow whose story was painfully familiar. Children who wanted to take over her house and her pension. Carol, Eleanor says to me as she arranges the flowers Jessica brought. Do you remember how scared we all were when we got here? Of course I remember. I thought I was useless, that I was a burden to everyone. And what do you think now? That the best years of my life began at 78, when I came to this house and learned that getting older is not synonymous with becoming invisible. During lunch, as always, we share news. Hope tells us she's been invited to give a talk at the state senate on financial protection for seniors. Rosemary tells us her bakery now has a waiting list for the baking courses she teaches. Sarah reads us a paragraph from her second book, which is about women who discovered their potential after 60. But the most exciting news comes from Jessica. Mom, I have something to tell you. Rick and I have been thinking, and we want to do something similar to what you did here. How so? We want to buy a bigger house and open a space for families who are going through crises like the one we went through. A place where they can learn to communicate, to respect each other, to solve their problems without destroying each other. Rick nods enthusiastically. The idea is for it to be like a school for families, for parents and children who are having conflicts over money, inheritances, caregiving, to come and learn how to treat each other with respect. And who's going to teach these classes? We are, Jessica says. We who lived through what happens when a family forgets that before anything else, they love each other. I'm quiet for a moment, feeling an emotion so deep I can barely breathe. My daughter, the same one who 5 years ago wanted to take my house and put me in a facility, now wants to dedicate her life to helping other families avoid the mistakes we made. Do you know what excites me most about your plan? I finally tell them. What, Mom? That you'll be teaching from experience. You'll be able to say, we were on the verge of destroying our family over money, but we learned that respect and true love are worth more than any inheritance. Jacob, who had been listening to the whole conversation, raises his glass of water as if to make a toast. To Grandma Carol, who taught us that saying no when necessary is an act of love. We all raise our glasses. Eleanor, with tears in her eyes, adds, to Carol, who taught us that age is not an illness, but an opportunity. Hope continues. To Carol, who showed us that it's never too late to start a new life. And Jessica, with a voice cracking with emotion, finishes, to my mom, who taught me that being a good mother doesn't mean sacrificing everything for your children, but teaching them to be good people. After lunch, while Jessica and I washed the dishes as we had done thousands of times during her childhood, my daughter asks me a question that surprises me. Mom, are you happy? Why do you ask? Because for years, I thought that for you to be happy, I needed to be successful, have money, live well. I never thought about your own happiness. Jessica, I am happier now than I have ever been in my entire life. Really? Really? Because for the first time in 70 years, I am living my own life, not someone else's. Don't you miss how things were before? I miss some things. I miss your dad every day. I miss the innocence of when you were a child. But I don't miss feeling invisible, useless, like a problem someone else had to solve. That evening, after all the family has gone, the 6 of us women sit in the living room watching a TV show about families who reconcile after years of conflict. During the commercials, they talk about their own families. Eleanor had managed to reconcile with her son after he realized his mother was better off living here than depending on him. Rosemary received weekly calls from her daughters, who had learned to respect her when they saw she could live perfectly well without them. Hope still had no contact with her children, but it no longer hurt because she had built a new family here. You know what I like most about living here? Says Christine, the newest member of the group. What? We all ask. That no one treats me like an old piece of furniture that needs to be put somewhere. Here, we are all people with opinions, with desires, with plans for the future. That night, before going to sleep, I'm alone in my room reading the letters that still arrive every week. Women from all over the country, and now from other countries too, who have read about our project and want to create something similar in their communities. One letter particularly caught my attention. It was from a young woman, about 30, who wrote to me, Mrs. Miller, I'm writing to thank you because your story helped me understand my own mother. I was like your daughter Jessica. I only saw my mom as someone who had to help me, not as a person with her own life. After reading about you, I started to really get to know my mother, and I discovered she is an extraordinary woman. Now we are friends, not just mother and daughter. Thank you for teaching me that respecting our parents doesn't mean using them. I closed the letter and put it away with all the others, in a box now full of stories of families that have healed, of women who have reclaimed their dignity, of children who have learned to see their mothers as whole people. Tomorrow, Monday, I will start a new week in my job as the General Coordinator of the government's Community Homes Program for senior women. We'll have meetings to plan the opening of 5 new houses in different parts of the state. A documentary crew is also coming to make a film about our project. But tonight, in the silence of my room, in the house I was about to lose, and which is now the heart of something that is changing lives across the country, I can only feel gratitude. Gratitude for having found the strength to say no when it was necessary. Gratitude for discovering that true love sometimes requires firm boundaries. Gratitude for learning that getting older can be the beginning of the greatest adventure of your life. And above all, gratitude for understanding that it's never, ever too late to start valuing yourself as much as you have valued others your entire existence. This is my story. The story of a woman who learned to say no and discovered that this small word had the power to transform not only her life, but the lives of hundreds of women who needed to see that it was possible to age with dignity, respect, and purpose. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt that your age makes you invisible, that your opinions don't matter, that you're a burden to your family, I want you to know something. It's not true. You matter, your decisions matter, and it's never too late to change your story. The question isn't whether someone else values you. The question is, do you value yourself? Have you lived through something like my story? Or do you know someone who has? If my story moved you, I ask you to share it. Leave us a comment telling us about your experience. And if this message touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel so this story can reach someone else who needs to hear that it's never too late to start living with dignity and respect.